Welcome to Community Roundtable. I'm Nick Burns from the Salt Lake Community College Division of Communication and Performing Arts. I'm your host as we explore topics of special interest and concern to the residents of the cities and the unincorporated areas of Salt Lake County. And these are topics that we feel are equally important to the general public throughout all the state of Utah. Today, the 2015 Utah legislative session has recently wrapped. And from up on the Hill, winners seem to be school children and prison reform. Losers seem to be air quality and health care for the poor and indigent. Today on Community Roundtable, we'll talk about the legislative session with two of our elected state officials. Joining us, he represents House District 34, Representative Johnny Anderson. Thank you. And also with us, she represents District 5 on the west side of Salt Lake Valley, Utah State Senator Karen Mayne. Hi.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for being here. So today on Community Roundtable, it's the legislative wrap-up show. So Senator Mayne, I'll start with you. Background, decades in education yourself.
Right.
Many people consider K through 12 the huge big winner in the session. And I wonder if you agree with that. Some people said there should have been more support. What's your take on how K through 12 fared?
I think that we need to fund K through 12 and preschool. I taught first grade for 20 years. I retired from Granite School District just to be a senator, so that's all I do full time, which is a big job. But we need to make sure if children come into school with language issues and are not given those fundamentals, they starve for education. They are behind before they get there. We need to make sure not just those privileged children, all children are educated early.
So was that part of this funding or not for mandatory preschool or help for preschool?
I think you've seen funding the last few years for that, and hopefully the bills that we pass now will accommodate those we have passed in the future.
Okay, because we saw what, a 4% increase, which was double the last couple of years.
Yes, and it needed to be. If I was the master, I would have given more.
Okay, and Representative Anderson, you also used to be a teacher, so you also have a background in education.
Yeah, I worked as a preschool teacher for a number of years.
And so what's your take on how education fared this session?
Well, education did well financially this session, but as the senator pointed out, there's still room for that budget to grow. We need to put more resources into education moving forward, but there was a lot of needs this year. There's a lot of needs every year, but we had some big things to accomplish, and we had a successful session for sure.
Okay, often the complaint seems to be that the legislature, the Senate and the House say we gave all this money to education, but really all it is enough to kind of keep up with where we were with the increased students population. But this year sounds better than that.
Yeah, you're right. For the past few years, that's been about all we could afford to fund was the growth in student population. But this year, there was, not only did we fund the growth, but we were able to put in an increase in the weighted pupil unit. So it's been a better year. But again, we're still not back to where we were pre-recession with funding, education funding levels. So we've got work to do.
Okay, and even pre-recession, we weren't exactly sterling nationwide.
Sure.
Okay. What do each of you make of State Superintendent Smith's comments, in my paraphrase, calling teachers basically spoiled kids? Any comment?
My concern is he's the leader of the band. Why would he do that? And my concern is we pass lots of legislation that are particular to computers or whatever. If you look at what the legislation we have passed, many computer programs, many vendor programs that accommodate children.
Testing requirements,
testing
things like
requirements. There's too much of that. And we have passed many pieces of legislation with good points and bad points, but they all have to be accommodated in schools. And so I think that's an issue, and I have voted for some and against some, where you can't test the kid to death, which I think we do. I think that if in my world, I would test the beginning and the end and give that teacher the responsibility during that year to test. Say, we need you to test 2 or 3 times that year, because they can see that child. They know who needs to be. I think that I'm concerned about the monies that are going in to the computer funding. You can only teach so much in a computer. That teacher needs to be valued.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, with the superintendent, he has an interesting sort of balance beam to be on. You know, he not only does he represent the state school board and is intended to be the one representing public education as a whole. He also has to, sort of be there representing them to the legislature and try to maintain relationships. So it was an unfortunate comment. He's since apologized, which is appropriate. I think as he gains more experience at this level, he'll probably avoid those kind of guffaws, hopefully.
So okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Senator Mayne, there's two things that you were getting at there I wanted to go back to. One was this notion of testing kids to death. But related to that, testing itself has become a huge money-making industry.
Correct.
And that's a frequent complaint that you're also alluding to, that a lot of legislation gets passed that shovels money towards testing, towards technology, to specific vendors, which...
I think there needs to be a balance, because
Okay.
I did this for 20 years. There's only so much room in a computer program room. There's only so many technicians that can balance those testing. That teacher cannot learn every program. Her job is to teach.
Yeah, and we don't provide enough computer technology in the schools to even kind of meet the needs of the testing requirements that are in place.
Wow.
I voted against a bill this year that was run by Senator Stevenson and
Right.
Representative Moss, and it wasn't that I don't agree that technology has a place in school, but I said, doggone it, before we spend more money on computer-based learning, we need to have some computers in the classroom for the kids to be able to utilize.
And do bills like that ever include funding to actually teach the teachers how to effectively use the equipment?
Not often enough. I can't remember if this one did. It seems like there may have been a component to help with that. And there's certainly money in there to help train teachers on technology, but it's still not enough. That's one of the places where we have sort of a glaring need. We've got all these software-based programs that are available, not enough computers for the kids and the teachers to be able to use them effectively, and yeah, the teachers have not received the training.
And I'd like to speak to that. The teacher can't have any more schooling about programs. We need technicians in those computer rooms, and they know the programs. They're the ones that can keep the computer, because when you go into a computer room with a class, if one of those computers goes down, that teacher's sitting there for 20 minutes trying to make it. That's not her job.
Right.
Her job is to bring them in and have those technicians know the skill and to run those computers so she can go around and help. That's what's missing.
So the tech support side as well.
Yes, that's
I mean,
missing to me.
it sounds so good, but there's also concerns with education when it's a poor school district, the computers end up replacing teachers, whereas if it's a wealthy school district, the kids are taught to master the machine. And I think that's a split that I don't think Utah legislature's figured out.
And I agree. We need to fund techs, and that's their job, because
Yeah.
a teacher teaches. She's not everything everywhere to everybody. She needs to teach those children.
Good point. I wonder, since the legislative session ended, there's been a number of letters to the editor and discussion in the media, and this happens every year, saying that everyone in the House and Senate should just spend a day teaching in a classroom. What do you think of
we
that?
have.
Yeah, some
So,
of us have.
You have, but the other 100 folks?
Well, I think more than a day. I mean, you've got to be there every day, and discipline and all those things that make a well-rounded teacher. And that's, our job is to appreciate that and to fund it and to let teachers teach.
Yeah. Now, the Utah State Legislature, and this is monitored nationwide by the NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures, they kind of gauge how often members of the House and Senate are in classrooms, and we do very well. As a matter of fact, we're at the top of the heap year after year for the amount of time that our members spend in a classroom. But they could certainly do more. And going into a classroom and reading a story to a group of children is a wonderful thing. The kids appreciate it. I'm sure the teacher appreciates it. It's a great, photo opportunity. But that doesn't really, that doesn't really give you the kind of opportunity to spend time with kids and see what the challenges exist in a classroom and what the needs for, students from various backgrounds are having in schools today. So yeah, I think we could certainly do more. But it's a busy job as it is, and it's easy to say, well, anybody in the legislature should know everything about the prison system and everything about the transportation system and everything about the school system, and that's unreasonable. It just is.
Certainly with a 45-day session.
Yeah, yeah.
When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get into some of those issues you just mentioned, with the prison reform, transportation, and so on. So keep it tuned on SLCCTV. We'll be right back with more of our wrap-up of the legislative session. Keep it tuned. We are back on Community Roundtable, talking with Representative Anderson, talking with Senator Mayne about the legislative session that recently wrapped. Representative Anderson, you mentioned the prison and you mentioned transportation. Let's, I'll say, jump into the prison first. Senator Mayne, you're actually on that committee.
I am.
Tell us where we're at.
I joined the committee about 5 months ago, but I think people need to know that decision was made before I even agreed to be there. And what I did is we're going to change the whole way we treat inmates. We're going to change the whole program, and the only way to do that is in a new prison. And so I'm glad to be there. It's a challenge. We're choosing our location, but we need it to happen.
So prison reform is wrapped up in prisoner treatment reform, drug treatment, addictions, and so on.
That's right.
Okay.
It's in the 90s, 92 or 94, those people are all going to come back into our communities, and 80-some-odd% have drug-related issues. We can't just throw people in jail and expect them to come back whole. So we're going to have, and Representative Hutchings, thank goodness, has legislation that we're going to reform the way that we treat inmates. We're going to treat the whole person when they're out of prison. We have drug courts and we have veteran courts. That's appropriate. Those populations need to be treated differently. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, go ahead. It's high time in the state of Utah that we recognize we've got at least two different populations of what we term as criminals. We've got the people that we're scared of, and then we got the people that we're mad at. And we need to be treating them differently. We should certainly not be taking the folks, as Senator Mayne pointed out, that have drug problems, maybe have an emotional problem, and turn to drug abuse, chemical abuse as a result, and throwing them in with the people that we're scared to death of, that need to be locked up and need to stay there. And the work that Representative Eric Hutchings has done on this has been amazing. This was a landmark bill, for sure.
This is a huge sea change. We've had this war on drugs and locking people up through the 80s, 90s, and aughts. I mean, this is huge.
Yeah.
It is.
What prompted the change? Why this sudden sea change, seems to me?
Maybe we just woke up and said, this isn't working.
Not only that, we've been tracking, our prison population, how it's growing. Our prison population in Utah is growing at a faster rate than even the national average. And we pride ourselves in Utah being, we're better than other states in most areas, but this is one place where we were not doing even as good a job as what's going on in the nation. So Representative Hutchings has been at this for a very long time, very well respected around the nation, and very well educated on these issues. And he has come forth with a superb package. So.
The Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County started some of this diversion kind of treatment stuff a few years ago, and the numbers really panned out. This is cheaper too.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's far less expensive to treat somebody for their drug abuse than to lock them up at the state pen.
Yeah.
And we've had the Pew Institute, they've come in and as an independent think tank and have given us all this data. So it's an independent entity that says, this works, this doesn't. So we have the ability to fix it, and so that's where we're going to go. We want to fix it. We want to make people whole. We just don't want to throw them back in jail. That's counterproductive to all of us.
Yeah.
So the big gorilla in the room, the pink elephant, where to move it to?
Yes, that's true, and we're thinking about that, and we'll have a decision. What we're doing now is we're doing tests in the ground, what will support the prison, and I think people, maybe they don't realize, and maybe I just know it. You're not going to have towers. It's probably going to look like the community college. I've seen lots of designs. There's no towers. There's no fences. There's nothing. It's going to, wherever we decide to put it, it's going to be something that's compatible with the area, and we understand the impact. We know the opinions of the people. We know we met with the elected officials. We will have something in the probably next few months. So we're meeting, but it needs to move. In my opinion, it needs to move. You cannot, and I've had people speak to me, well, let's just destroy a building and put them somewhere else to move. You can't do that. It's like a hospital. When you build the hospital, you move all the patients, and then you destroy the hospital. These are people in prison. Mm-hmm. You can't put them somewhere for 2 years till we destroy this building and build it up again. It's piece working. It doesn't work. It's ineffective, and it shouldn't. It's not a way to run a system. It's not a way to even run a business.
So the cynical might say the fix is already in, and the prison is going to Salt Lake City.
I'm saying that we have 5 areas. We're choosing nothing. I mean, I have no dog in the fight, and I think that's why I'm effective in the prison committee, because I have an independent voice for that. Whatever's the best, wherever we feel that it should be, that's where it will be. So you're on the commission, but none of these 5 are in your folks that you represent. No. For either of you, I don't think. No, but many of we have the same population. Many of our citizens, our constituents, work at the prison. Sure. And we have 1,200 volunteers that go into that prison monthly. We need to make it conducive for them. It cannot run without volunteers, period. So we need to make, that's in consideration too.
Okay. Transportation. Okay. So Representative Anderson, you were in the thick of that.
Yeah, I chair the House Transportation Committee, and we passed a very important bill this year. It's a bill that, like it or not, is going to increase taxes, not only this year. Well, in January of 2016, we'll see an increase in the fuel tax, but we have now indexed the fuel tax so that it moves with the price of fuel. So as the price of fuel goes up in the future, we will see our fuel tax move right along with that. And it's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. I don't like paying more in taxes. I know the senator certainly doesn't. She drives a lot and doesn't want to pay more for gas. But we needed to make a change in how we were funding transportation. Back in 1997, the last time we had a gas tax increase, 100% of our state's transportation budget was funded by those taxes. It was funded by fuel tax and registration fees. Over the last 17, 18 years, that has changed because the legislature has failed to address the needs of the transportation system with the fuel tax. We have been taking more and more money out of the general fund, to the point now that we spend more general fund money on the transportation budget than we do the user fees, the gas tax and the registration fees. So this is going to begin to steer the ship in a different direction. It will be good for transportation, infrastructure, economic development, not only for us now, but for future generations. And it will set us on a path where we do not rely so heavily in the future on more and more general fund dollars. We're putting it back on the user fee.
And we're going in a full circle here in our conversation today, because one of the things that got robbed to pay for transportation was education.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, almost tongue-in-cheek, I say this is probably the most important education funding bill that's been passed in a long time, and it's about steering that ship in a better direction. And again, do we want to pay higher and higher state sales tax to fund transportation, or is it more appropriate that we pay for the transportation system with those user fees? And I think it is. I think it should be a user fee based.
So real quickly, I know we have to take a quick break, but real quickly, what kind of a lift was that to get a tax increase passed? That seems huge for Utah.
It was massive. I've spent the last 2 years working with stakeholders at the local level, at the state level, business groups, and it wasn't just me. Don't get me wrong. This was a team effort, but yeah, this went right down to the wire, working with members of the House and the Senate, trying to get something that was not only palatable, passable, but something that was equitable across the state. And we came up with what I think is an outstanding package.
And the public seems to be fairly on board with this. I haven't heard a whole lot
Yeah,
of complaints.
I've had two constituents talk to me about this, and both of them said thank you and congratulations.
Wow.
It's about time somebody addressed this problem. So, yeah.
And I support this. I was in the confirmation meeting
That's
at
right.
the last hour. I 100% voted for everything the good representative did. We need, especially in our area, we drive, and people get it. And I think people need to know that the money at the pump, that's not to build new roads. That is to fix what we have. And I think, I mean, they get it. We have potholes, all those things, but we needed to do this. And I think people, they're reasonable. They understand. That's our job, to screen things out, to say this is what we need to do. And I think they trust us in our judgment on this. We need good transportation.
When we come back, let's talk about health care, let's talk about public lands, and a couple other things that came up in the legislative session.
Sure.
Keep it tuned. SLCCTV will be back with more legislative wrap-up with Senator Mayne and Representative Anderson. Keep it tuned. We are back on Community Roundtable, talking with Senator Mayne, talking with Representative Anderson. A bunch of things to cover here. Let's start with health care. Senate yay, House nay, and now promises to do something.
Yeah.
Something going to happen or not?
That's correct. I think we were right. The senators went the right way. I've always supported Healthy Utah. In my community, it's just needed so much. You're hurting the people that are working. These are people that are working poor. And college students or whatever, they need this piece of legislation. And so I think the senators, we made the right decision.
This is one of those weird things where I'm put in the position of almost having to defend decisions that I really didn't support. I'm also in favor of Healthy Utah and had been a strong proponent of that for quite some time. But I can tell you the reason that I think the majority of the members in the House were so concerned with this really came down to the fact that they do not trust the federal government as a partner. When we talk about, well, for the first few years, you know, there's no match required by the federal government. Then it was, oh yeah, there is. We have to, you know, put money into administration and all this, and it was several $1 million. And as we move towards the 90-10 match years, which is 6 or 7 years down the road, it was, well, how can we count on the federal government to maintain that 90% match? You know, the 70-30 match that we have on Medicaid wasn't always a 70-30 match. It used to be a greater funding match from the federal government, and that had been rolled back. And they were concerned about it being something that was not necessarily sustainable. They didn't want to provide a benefit to people that the state couldn't afford years down the road. I think there would have been plenty of ways to work that out, but that was the feeling of most members of the House.
Do you think it would be the same general mistrust if it was a Romney care, not an Obamacare? Had the federal election gone differently?
Well, you know what? Yeah, we've had presidents of all stripes in office since Medicaid has been put in place, and things have changed regardless. So I know people like to assume that it was a partisan issue. I did not see that. I'll tell you, I am in those caucuses, and I'm the one, you know, saying Healthy Utah is the way to go. But it wasn't necessarily about partisanship. It was about concern with the federal government as a partner. And surely there were those who did not want to advance the Affordable Care Act, what they consider to be the federal takeover of health care. But that became less and less part of the argument, especially in the last year. It was really about, can we trust the feds to maintain that 90-10 match in the future moving forward? And, you know, is it going to be an expense that the state of Utah can maintain? So,
and I appreciate that. But do we take the money from the federal government when we want to, and then we don't trust them when we don't want to? So all the grants at the community college, we trust that, or the money that comes from transportation, we trust that.
I will tell you, there are plenty of members in the House Republican caucus who don't even trust that. They have a very strong distrust of the federal government. I don't share those views, but they are there. And
just to be clear, you yourself Republican, Senator Mayne Democrat, so we've got both sides of the aisle here at the table. Yeah. But as you say, in some cases, we're happy to take Fed money for water development projects.
Most cases.
Yeah.
Look at farmers.
Yeah.
And I mean, we trust when we choose, and I think this, and I understand my colleagues, there is the philosophy there, and I understand that, and they're looking down the road. So I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I believe that you know, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and the Governor, they will fulfill that promise. They'll get together, try to come up with something that would be I don't know, passable by both bodies. I think that will happen. I wish that we had passed Healthy Utah. I think that the Governor put together a fabulous response to the Affordable Care Act, one that would really have worked for Utah. But that was just that was not the consensus in the House of Representatives.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to look forward to June or July and whatever the special session makes happen. So only a couple minutes left, but I do want to ask about the air that we breathe. Not much movement or change to help clean our air.
As part of the transportation funding bill, we've got components in there for local governments to help them address local issues, and part of that is transit funding, which in my opinion is the most important thing we can do for air quality, is get more buses out there with more frequent bus service, being able to serve more people. If people have access to the buses and then can eventually use the rail system through the bus system, they've told the senator over and over again, people out in our area, they would use a bus if the bus were there to use. And so that's been one of the big things that I've pushed and I recognize people have concerns with UTA management, and I share those concerns, but I'm less worried about the managers at UTA than I am about the people who need the bus service. And so I've done what I can and will continue to work on getting more resources out there for people who need public transportation and people who can benefit from it, because it benefits all of us. It reduces the number of cars on the road, reduces the number of tailpipes spewing stuff into the air. So
might even reduce the amount of urban sprawl spreading out north, south, east, west.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
The Senate overall, in terms of air, didn't seem to be much movement or interest there either.
There wasn't. And I would like to see, as my good colleague has stated, I think we need the buses to be more natural gas, the school buses, all those big vehicles there. I think those things can be done, and I think hopefully we'll move more and more towards that. Everybody wants a cleaner environment, and we share the same issue. We do not have good bus service out in our communities. I don't think any of the outlying, like West Jordan, they don't have it like they do in Salt Lake. Those buses come every 15 minutes. And where we are, you have to go a mile to get there. I think when that comes about, they want to do it. It's just so inconvenient for them. So we hope that putting everything together, that'll be a push that people would ride the bus. It's just they don't want to take 2 hours to go to work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Good point. So only about a minute left. Final thoughts? What's next?
Gosh, I'll continue working on important transportation stuff. As we pointed out, there's still work to be done on the education budget, but the state's economy is still doing extremely well, which means that there should be additional general fund dollars. And I know that Senator Mayne and I will be two people there that are fighting to get those dollars into education where we need it. So.
And Representative Johnny Anderson, thank you. And Senator Mayne, I'll give you the last word.
I'd like to speak about SB 199. That's the piece of legislation I passed that's going to change the whole way we govern Salt Lake County. The townships will be held whole. Those townships that want to be cities and annex, they can do that. But that bill changes the whole way we financially and emotionally handle Salt Lake County business.
Is that on the governor's desk?
That's on the governor's desk.
Do you know if he'll sign it?
Oh, of course.
He'll
sign it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a good piece of legislation.
Great. We're going to have to leave it there. Senator Mayne, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Representative Anderson, thank you very
You bet.
much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Community Roundtable. If you have a comment, maybe you have a question, maybe you have an idea for a future show, reach out. You can reach us at SLCCTV.com, and all our shows are archived there as well. SLCCTV.com. I'm Nick Burns. Keep it tuned right here, SLCC TV.